All right, boys. We're gonna be talking about the ban list, putting getting banned and Rygo getting unbanned. There's some very interesting applications and effects on the meta, especially with Nami running around and being the most represented deck. For March 15th, I think this is posted, so it's been 4 days. With Nami being a prevalent deck and also playing like two puddings, there's a lot to talk about. And we're gonna be talking about the most major decks. So we're gonna be talking about Nami, Lucy, Anel, Ace, Skyf, and Luffy, Dofi, Calgara, Boa, Mihawk, and we're just gonna not talk about the other five decks. They are still good decks, don't get me wrong, and they can win an event. That's a good thing about this meta. Any deck on this screen, including some other decks that aren't even mentioned, can definitely win an event, like for sure. It's just like the likelihood, and we're gonna be talking about the most likely decks, so that's why we're gonna do it this way. So we're gonna be talking about the biggest offender right now, Nami. So it got a nerf, and it also got a slight buff because it could, in theory, play Rygo. This is just like first list I found, flagship list. So they do play two. This list plays one pudding. So that's already a hit. But I think they do have room to play Rygo, although also losing Red Rock for rotation. So they're losing two major cards. But I think they do have room and space to play Rygo. And I guess it's also like a list that isn't playing Thriller Slop as well. Like you could also in theory play Thriller Bark Engine. But yeah, this list is losing two big things for rotation and the ban list. Which I think is fine. I think Nami is still going to be a deck that is going to still be around. If you are playing the Whitebeard variant, it's going to hurt a little bit more because you're susceptible to Rygo, getting Rygo'd out your Whitebeard. You're going to have 10 beard, then they're going to Rygo you, and you're just going to feel really, really sad. So maybe this variant isn't going to be as prevalent because I think, again, 10 bearding to Rygo is just always just going to feel super disheartening. But you're not going to be worried about getting pudding, and this deck usually has like an 8-card hand. Normally because the later skill always draws when you take a life. So it always has an 8-card hand or 7 to 8 card hand. So not being able to worry about getting puddinged in the Boa, the mirror, all that matters. So I think the deck is still going to be just fine. If you're playing the Thriller Bark Slop Engine, like yeah, that one's going to be completely fine. Maybe the 10 beard one is going to be a little bit worse, but that's just my thoughts. Same with Ace. This list isn't playing any. Oh, it's playing one pudding. They do play the one pudding. So Ace does end up hoarding a lot of cards. Marco draw 2, 10 beard drawing, Yamato drawing. This guy's playing Cavendish. Like this deck draws like a billion cards. And not being able to worry about pudding is a big plus. Like I think this deck doesn't care about pudding, like losing their pudding. Because the plus side on them losing their pudding is they don't have to worry. Don't have to guard really hard. They can actually just take life, really efficiently and have like a billion cards in hand and not care. So I think that is just a straight plus, a straight W for this deck. They also didn't lose I Am Whitebeard, losing Red Rock, which kind of hurts. But I don't think this deck cares that much, to be honest, because the game plan is still the same. Drop my 10 beard. And then drop another 10 beard and drop as many other 10 beards as you saw in like the Worlds match, I think semifinals. Just dropped 4 10 beards and we're good. We're green. So you can just drop 10 beards and gameplay doesn't change. Again, Ryo's a little annoying for this deck because if you are against a Yell deck, you have to kind of worry about, are they on Rygo? Are they not on Rygo? And because the meta is still so fresh and we don't have any real events, you don't really know if your opponent is going to be on Rygo. If they do decide to tech in like a 2 Rygo, it's going to get kind of annoying for you if you just randomly lose your 10 beard, your first 10 beard to a Rygo. And they can also like do like Rygo plus the new Zoro to heal. So it can get kind of weird. So that's slightly annoying. And since yellow is, I think, the most popular color at the moment, you could see Rygo. So it is slightly annoying. But I think overall this deck is still in a pretty good position, like a pretty healthy position IMO. We're going to talk about Lucy. Lucy gets a big buff. Huge buff. Because this deck hoards cards. This deck has like 15 card hands. 13 card hands. Like it's gross. and they don't have four-way pudding. So I think this deck got a significant buff because they no longer care about pudding. This deck does have like weird matchups where it can get weird when you play into like Sky Luffy because you have no removal still. Like that's still like a weird thing this deck has. But I think this deck has a significant buff. I think this deck is like gonna be a real contender for OP15. That's my opinion. We're gonna go on to Boa. I think Boa fell off. I think Boa's gonna fall off really hard. Because let's think about it. Boa has no way. I guess like yeah, you could perfume, but the emo matchup now sucks because you can't just put in their hand and hope they have a bad hand, right? Like you can pressure them like extremely freely. They play two puddings. So I think that is a big loss. So your even matchup now sucks. Your ace matchup also just now kind of sucks because I don't think ace cares. Like you know what I mean? Like I can hoard a bunch of cards in my hand. I'm a 6K like leader. I can stall out the game as long as possible. Drop 3 10 on you, and you're gonna lose. Like you're just gonna lose. So I think that also just sucks because you can't put in their hand. Like they start hoarding cards. You have nothing. You can't do anything about it. And Boa can't hoard the same way. It's like not one of those blue decks that just draw a billion cards. So that also sucks. I think the non-matchup might not be favorable for you either. So I think the deck is gonna like see a slight decrease, just based on some of those factors. Obviously, they have the Quasar Borso line, which is still good. Like I think it's still unfair. That's like the only unfair thing about yellow at the moment. The Borsa Quasar line. But I think that will be less popular going into the new meta. I think it's still a good deck. Like it's an alright pick. It can technically still top an event. I just don't think it's gonna be super duper relevant. Sky Island Luffy. This deck is super interesting. This deck does draw a lot of cards because Calgera. Just based on what Calgera does, when a life card leaves when a life card is removed, draw a card, and this is just really strong. Like just drawing infinite cards every time you remove your opponent's or your own life cards is pretty busted. So you can sort of like hoarding cards really quickly with Calgera, and it's unremovable because Skyline Luffy will just say, yeah, no, like this card's staying on the board at all times. So I think this card's super good. I don't think this deck also cares too much about putting. Like I think like this deck didn't need to like hoard cards, right? Like it wasn't like a deck that assumed hoard cards. It's also a deck that doesn't really care about Raigo because like you Raigo my stuff, I say okay, you wasted 6 Dawn to Raigo my stuff, I'm gonna take a life, right? So this deck is I think in a really good position because one, it didn't really care about putting, and then two, you cannot Raigo my stuff. Like it's impossible. Like, you cannot Raigo any of my cards because I'm just gonna take a life and you use 6 Dawn to do nothing essentially. So I think Skylight and Luffy is also in a good position. I think a lot of these decks, as you noticed, except Boa, are in great spots even though putting got banned, and Raigo is free. So I think Raigo being unbanned, I thought a lot of people had like a lot of uproar on Twitter saying, "Bro, Yellow keeps getting good shit. Quasar, Borsa, Raigo." I don't know how much Raigo really matters in our current board state. Like as you can see, Calgera. Getting Raigo is slightly annoying, I guess. But this deck goes so wide where it's like, okay, you Raigo my stuff, okay. I don't really care. Getting banned is also really relevant because this deck also does draw a lot of cards. As you've seen with most of the decks, like also a lot of these top decks draw a good amount of cards. They will end up with like 7-8 card hands. So Calgera not needing to worry about putting is relevant because this card here, I think it gets 2 Genuine Warriors, or I guess, right? Or I guess like Noland, right? So you draw 2 cards. It's basically add 2 cards in your hand. So you have 2 cards in hand already. So this deck does have a lot of cards. So not getting pudding does matter. Like this is something that really does matter. And then this deck also has room to play a Raigo, because you could Raigo something away, play Zoro. I don't know how many copies you would end up fitting in here, maybe 2. because like usually you want to monkey Luffy, but also like your lead skill is one non-play character, right? So you could definitely fit in Raigo, I think, like extremely easily. I don't know what you'd remove and cut. I haven't played Calgera enough to really determine on what we're moving and cutting, but you have space to run it. I think this deck got a significant buff with the addition of Kingdom Come and Pudding Ban. I think a lot of these decks, so they like really do like Pudding Ban because they no longer have respect in the blue matchup. Damn, bro, I have 10 cards in my hand. If I get Pudding right here, I'm cooked. And sometimes Pudding also leads to really terrible board states or terrible game states, I should say, not board states. When you have 5 cards in hand and they just Pudding you, and you got Pudding into a infinitely worse hand, and you're like, damn, I lost the game because you got Pudding at 5, right? We're gonna talk about Gecko Moria. Gecko Moria didn't have big hands normally anyway, so never really cared about Pudding. And then 2, I don't think you have room to fit. I don't think this deck has room to fit in Kingdom Come. Not that or I say Kingdom Come, Raigo. I don't think this deck cares. A lot of these things have on KO effects, so you KO my Hogback, my Perona, my Absalom. They don't care. Let's just get like you could care my Borso, but like okay, like I guess you Raigo my Borsalino. You can Raigo my Gecko Moria. This deck is just a deck that I decided to talk about, even though it wasn't even on the graphic, because I saw like a combo where it could technically, in theory, like draw like go plus infinite on life, not plus infinite flip guaranteed, but just like some weird slop thing you could do with Quasar plus Borsa with like some other thing with Hogback, I think, which got like really weird. So I decided to talk about it, but I don't think this deck is relevant. It's just like a funny deck I thought was like good to talk about. Now we're gonna talk about Bonnie. Bonnie is a deck that also, like no joke, has like 13 card hands. Like disgusting. So they just take all life. Like you swing at them, they're like, okay, take until they have 1 life, so they can be a 7 lead and start doing stuff, right? So Bonnie like loves that Pudding's Band. I don't think you can fit in Raigo, because when you're at 1 life, you kind of have to play your Zoro, your Luffy, or Borsalino to gain that life back to like kind of stabilize, like put you in like good range. So I don't think it's really possible for you to play Raigo. But I think Pudding being banned makes this deck very viable, like extremely viable. You have some more room to work with. I think this deck is like, there's like potential in the deck. I'm not sure how much potential this deck has, but I think there is potential for sure. Like positively, there's potential in the deck. We're gonna talk about Pino. That is like the big scary man, the big boogeyman in the format. Raigo being unleashed, the deck doesn't care. Your 2 main monsters are unaffected by Raigo, and getting Pudding, this deck also like kind of like hovers around 7 card hand. So getting Pudding for 2, I think is fine. It's like getting like a law blockered, right? 4 cost law blocker for 2, like that's also like I think very reasonable. So it's like doesn't change. Like the meta, Ryo getting unbanned and Pudding getting banned does not change the deck. This deck is still strong. There's literally no changes, like 0 changes to how PNL feels about the current state of the meta. It could feel I guess like slightly better into certain matchups because they've lost stuff potentially, but I think the deck is still the same, like unchanging. Dofi, I'm a big Dofi fan. Yeah, sue me. I think Dofi's slightly annoyed by some of the changes, because you're gonna force into playing Vorgo. I guess not annoyed actually. I think the deck doesn't care. I've actually thought about it. The deck actually doesn't care. You play Virgo, you can't Raigo my stuff. Sweet. Then this deck also like has a potentiality of hoarding cards, because your leader ability also lets you redirect attack, so it's 1 attack. So I've played games where I'm at 0 life for like 6-7 turns and not mattering, because I just had a billion cards and one of your attacks never hit me. So like doesn't care about Rygo because Virgo exists, and then the deck also doesn't care because, or the deck is buffed because pudding is no longer a factor. The deck still struggles into Ace because 10 Beard exists, but maybe because Rygo is a potentiality, it could kill the Aces. You never know. So the deck also is unchanged. I think better position because pudding is banned, but very much unchanged. I think that's what I kind of want to talk about. Going back into this image, a lot of these meta decks are unchanged. Pudding getting banned just makes everybody hand size like unchecked, which is I think fair because the only deck that would check you is a blue deck, right? Like when you play into any other matchup, again, as an example, like red yellow Bonnie, where they have 13 cards in hand, you're not getting pudding, right? Or I'm playing against, like, if I'm a Pino, I'm playing against red blue Bonnie, and they have 13 cards in hand, I have no out to that anyway. So it just evens the playing field for everybody, and like lessen the RNG factor of just getting randomly puddinged, and you're like, damn, I lost the game because I got puddinged. I do think this game should have like some form of hand disruption that you have to respect. Like I think Law Blocker is fair. He only rips 2, and it is random, but it rips 2, which is fine. And I also think Ezo, for example, like the 8-cost Ezo that ripped 2 is also fair. Like things like that, I think are fair forms of hand control. Pudding was just an unfair card because it just leads to really random game states where even if you had 5 cards in hand, you played well all game long, you're getting puddinged with your 5-card hand and losing on spot because you got an infinitely worse hand than your 5-card hand is disheartening, right? It's super disheartening. So I think pudding getting banned is super fair and leads to way more balanced games. So it will lead to the better player winning 9% of the time, which I love. I think the better player should always win, because that's how I think the game should work, right? You shouldn't lose the game because you got randomly RNG pudding when you played well the entire game. So I think that's good. Rygo getting unbanned doesn't really matter, as I've talked about. I think like maybe 3 decks care overall. Like, you know what I mean? Like Ace, I guess technically Lucy could get Rygo for their 7 Saba and be like, oh damn, kind of sad. But that's about it. And then the decks that can play it, like your Nami, like your Skyline Luffy, like your maybe potential Boa, they might not run it, or they won't run it at like a high enough clip where it's like super scary, right? Honestly, I don't know. We have not seen any events yet with Rygo and pudding banned, so I couldn't tell you how the meta is going to shape up, but that's just my thoughts. Let me know what you guys think in the comments section below, and that'll be it. Hope you guys have a nice day. Peace.